Thank you very much. In this era of the smart ships and carbon neutrality, I would like to talk about the strategies that ships must embrace for future. In particular, I would like to talk about the marine equipment to realize our vision of green ships. So my presentation will mainly focus on marine equipment. We had the very technical presentation just before, but I will just give you the overview of what kind of equipment are required and how we can secure technologies in order to achieve the vision of eco-friendly ships. So this is my agenda. I will first begin with why we need to build and develop smart green ships. Then I'm going to talk about some major strategies, mainly in four sectors. As you know, the international regulations have heightened the need to develop low carbon, environment friendly vessels. IMO has come up with the several mandatory requirements recently, and also domestically, Korea has adopted the environment friendly law. So already we do have domestic legislation, and that legislation has been applied already to coastal ships in Korea. So mainly led by public organizations, already the green vessels have been introduced, and I believe that it will have some trickle down to the private sector. And in order to promote eco-ship development, we also have to have the appropriate marine equipment. This slide is created by Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and this indicates the mega project, which is to develop technologies for low carbon ships for entire life cycle. So in order to have low carbon or no carbon ships, we have to develop technologies for fuel, as mentioned by previous speakers, and also for operation, vessel operation. Again, we have to conduct the remote monitoring and assessment. So the smart devices and equipment are required. Up until today, the marine equipment in the past, it only meant the equipment that are mounted on board, but we have to broaden the concept of marine equipment to embrace the ship design as well as the assessment and verification and maintenance of vessels. So we have to broaden our concept and definition of marine equipment. And I believe that you also agree with that. And in order to develop the leading edge marine equipment, technological development is important, but also legislation and establishing legal framework is very important. We also have to take leadership in international standardization so that equipments that are developed in Korea can dominate the global market and therefore creating the so-called super gap. In order to develop green ships, we have to succeed in energy transition. In other words, from the very phases of energy production to supply and transportation, we have to develop the eco-friendly approach. And even for like the fuel storage on board, and also the fuel supply system for engine. Although the name fuel supply system remains same, but depending on the fuels that are used, in fact, completely different requirements and equipment are required. And therefore, when we make proposal for a national research project, one thing that's very challenging is that when we suggest the idea of the development of the fuel supply system, then the public officers often think that we already have that, so they don't really select our idea. But in fact, depending on the fuels that we utilize, sometimes we need completely different fuel supply system, which needs to be developed. In order to take leadership in future technologies, we have to create the very wide gap for marine equipment technologies. The reason why I emphasize this is because starting from last year, you see that the order volumes for the shipbuilding starts to be increased starting from last year. So for the next 10 years down the road, shipbuilding industry will be able to maintain the current average volume of order. And when it comes to the marine equipment sector, I believe that we only have 10 years of guaranteed survivor. In other words, when there are orders available, we have to develop and secure future technology so that we can be prepared for future when the order of the shipbuilding decline. So even when Korean shipbuilders fail to take orders and receive orders, we still have to maintain the businesses. And for this, we have to develop cutting edge technology so that we can export our technologies to foreign companies, foreign shipbuilders. So, and also we have to establish some foundation for testing and demonstration. In other words, sometimes we develop very good technology, but then we fail to demonstrate technology, and that could be the stumbling block for commercialization. And so demonstration and verification technology is also required. And as I said earlier, we have to take leadership in setting the international standard so that Korean technology can be adopted as international standard. So it's for technologies. I think the previous speakers already covered this. I'm going to skip this. For the hydrogen-fueled ship, I think it was well elaborated by the previous speaker. So as he said, the hydrogen has a very low volume storage efficiency, and it requires a very low temperature storage condition. So it requires a lot of technologies, including pipeline and so on. So each of them is actually about equipment. So we have to pay attention to the development of marine equipment. And in this sense, I hope that the clients, the shipbuilders, should take leadership in developing and fostering equipment technologies so that Korea can enhance its competitiveness in this field. If you look at the examples of the EU, the US, and Japan, they already have their own proprietary technologies, and various demonstrators are already in operation. Korea is somehow slow, but fortunately, the Busan National University does have the plan, so maybe soon we are going to conduct the demonstration test. But what's more important is that the shipbuilders should utilize the domestic technologies for marine equipment as well. So for this technological part, I'm going to skip this. And for ammonia as a fuel for ship, Hyundai Heavy Engineering demonstrates global leadership, and I understand that they also developed the ammonia technology. But I hope that they could also pay heed to developing equipment as well, so that the domestic engines and all the equipment of the vessels can be secured domestically. And when it comes to toxicity, there are a lot of issues to be tackled for ammonia to be used as a fuel. So the treatment equipment and processing equipment, I think, have to be developed. And this is the blended fuel. As you know, the LNG and fuel oil, they're already utilized as DF, And we are, I understand that development is currently underway to produce low carbon blended fuel. And there were a lot of discussions and debates on KOMERI conference that took place last week. And I believe that by 2030, the hydrogen blended gas turbine is going to be commercially available, which means that we don't really have enough time to develop various equipment that are required for this gas turbine. So we really have to roll up our sleeves and step up our efforts for technological development. Next is about the electric propulsion ship. As you know, in terms of the battery capacity and the charging times, electric propulsion is currently applied first to coastal ships. A lot of coastal ships in Korea are converted into LPG-based ship, but there is also an effort to push forward with the transition to electric propulsion ship. So maybe starting from small scale boats and ships, we can apply electric propulsion system, and later on we can expand that to larger scale vessels. As you know, already in overseas, some vessels do have hybrid system that combine engine and battery. So for marine equipment, the inverter and the electric control module, as well as the superconductivity, high efficient modules. I think this is something that we can also work on. And fortunately for these three, I understand that the Korean company started the technological development already. So soon, I hope that the demonstration project will begin. For emission reduction device, as mentioned by the previous speaker, from 2030, LNG is going to be a basic for all vessels. So it's going to be mainstream. But what's unfortunate is that Korea actually received more than 90% of the LNG carriers order. But when it comes to LNG cargo handling devices such as pumps and compressors, as well as the BOG devices, there is a domestic company that succeeded in development, but they failed to move on to the demonstration phase. So currently, we don't really have domestic technology for this marine equipment. So in order to address these type of problems, currently we are trying to start the demonstration project. So although we are working, I hope that like we can have demonstration project soon for about 1 year. So out of 12 months, 9 months are for general operation, and for the remaining 3 months, I'd like to set aside the period for retrofitting. So I hope that we can have ample opportunities for demonstration tests for marine equipment that are developed in Korea. Bunkering equipment is also something that we have to pay attention to. So for LNG, we have the truck-to-ship and ship-to-ship technology. But in the future, especially for large vessels, we have to establish the infrastructures that provide terminal-to-ship solution. And fortunately, the Ulsan and Busan terminal are going to establish terminals for this bunkering vessels, but the progress is very slow. And also for electric propulsion ships, low voltage AMP is not enough because it's for the commercial normal vessels. So we have to prepare for high voltage AMP in order to provide sufficient electricity for the charging of electric fueled ships. So this is something that we also have to prepare for. I believe that already the experts are talking about that, but let us build and combine our forces together so that we can facilitate the time for this infrastructure building. Also, the equipment for the energy efficiency improvement or energy saving devices. So there are a lot of demands and needs. Shipbuilders, from the very phase of design, they have to take into consideration these energy saving devices. As you know, nowadays we do have a lot of lightweight modules and materials, as well as the CCS, and so various equipments have to be considered when the shipbuilders come up with a design. So when shipbuilders build plan for developing eco ships, they have to think about how to secure eco-friendly marine equipment from early phases. Next is about digital twin. So in order to enhance the operation efficiency, we have to have digital twin-based ship operation, and for this, various technologies and equipment have to be developed, especially not just for hardware, but also for software. Uh, we need to develop technologies. So remote monitoring and remote control for vessels. Again, for this field, we have to focus on developing right equipment. So in the future, I believe that the marine equipment should be connected equipment. There are no such thing as unconnected marine equipment in the future. So the equipment manufacturers will continue to work hard, but I hope that the shipbuilders will also take this issue more seriously. And this is about the testing and demonstration. So this LNG demonstration facility is going to be established next year, and I hope that this infrastructure will be well utilized. And also we have to develop technology for demonstration and verification. And our institute will lead the efforts for this. Next is about standardization. So not just for domestic standardization, we have to lead the efforts of international standardization so that the Korean technology can be adopted as international standard. And for this, our institute is a private organization. So together with the public organization, we will continue to redouble our efforts. So that was a very brief summary of what have been done in marine equipment sector, and especially the message that I want to emphasize is that we have to build the win-win partnership with the shipbuilders in order to develop environment-friendly marine equipment.
Thank you.